Thank you for joining this continuing series on the topics of OAuth 2.0 and OpenID Connect using the OAuth toolkit on top of Layer 7's API Management Gateway. In this continuing video, we're going to look at how to implement the sample test client that comes as an optional deployment component with the Layer 7 OAuth toolkit. Recall from previous video where we deployed the OAuth toolkit using extensions and add-ons onto our API gateway. A newly created OTK directory has been generated where we see directories for customizations of things like user authentication, authorization server, and authorization server template look and feel, and whether or not our access token should be a UUID or a JSON Web Token. We also have reusable policy fragments like the require an OAuth 2.0 token, which is now a reusable fragment which can easily be added to new or existing APIs to enable OAuth authorization. We also have a sample DMZ resource server, which is serving a sample API called Protected API. In this policy, we validate SSL, require the request message to present an OAuth access token. We'll cache the validation result in memory for 5 seconds for optimization, and we'll allow it to be reused as it's not a one-time access token. Upon successful validation of the token, we'll then return some populated context variables like the client applications identification, as well as the end user subscriber ID and the expiration time of the issued token. Browsing to the test client is as simple as accessing /OAuth/v2/client on your installed OAuth toolkit. Here you will see we support any number of OAuth 2.0 grant types, including resource owner password credential, client credential, and others. Now we're going to focus on the authorization code, where I'll be initiating an OAuth handshake and redirected to the OAuth 2.0 authorization server. Here my options would be to log in using a socially configured login provider, proximity login from an authorized device using QR code login. In this case, I'm going to log in with the user called OAuth user and grant and consent to the client application with the scope test. Here we can see the issued access token is a UUID. We also have a refresh token. In the sample test client, we can call an existing API, the protected API here. We can see a bit of return metadata, including the subscriber ID and any custom client values we can see here. Using our OAuth manager found at the same server /OAuth/manager, we can log in and examine the issued OAuth tokens that have been presented. Under clients, we can see our OAuth 2 sample client is available here with custom client values populated for our sample test client. We also have the individually issued access tokens. Here we can see the token issued for OAuth user and the access token itself. Now we have the control to continue allowing this OAuth access token until it expires, or we can come in here and revoke it. Now when I attempt to log in and I call my protected API, I get an invalid request and a validation error. My refresh token, initiate a refresh token, it's also been invalidated. can initiate a new OAuth handshake. Again, I can call my API repeatedly in my OAuth manager. On the refresh, I can see it is now available. Newly created token that I could further revoke or disable. In this case, I want to go back to my policy manager and assert some control as an administrator on the particular OAuth token that's issued and call it a one-time access token. We'll set that to true. Hit OK, save, and activate. Now when I attempt to access the same API, it's successful one time, but on the second call through, it's no longer good. I need to refresh my access token and get a new one. Well, let's clear the session. Now, rather than configuring a UUID access token, let's see how easy it is to customize the issuance of our OAuth toolkit to generate a JSON Web Token. Here we can see the default configuration has the JSON Web Token capability disabled. If I go to my revision history and enable the new version, here we see a policy that will generate a JSON Web Token. If OpenID is part of the approved scope, it will also include the user's username. It will then proceed to sign the JSON payload. Here, using the encode JSON Web Token assertion, we can see that we're going to generate a JSON Web Signature using HMAC, RSA, or elliptic curve signature algorithms. We could select a symmetric key from a context variable available as a JSON Web Key set, or private key available on the gateway. We can optionally also encrypt the payload using any number of key management algorithms and different content encryption algorithms. And you can also include JSON Web Key set. So now that this is enabled, we can go back to our sample client, issue a new OAuth handshake, grant the application, and now we see we have a JSON Web Token rather than a UUID. Signed and available to be validated by backend systems with no connection to the OAuth server. When we call the API, we successfully see the same client ID and authenticated end user. I hope this helps illustrate how to install and get started using the templated OAuth solution available with the Layer 7 Gateways OAuth Toolkit. Next, we'll take a look at the SAML bearer assertion grant type in the test client.